Harper Audio presents Secrets of the Millionaire Mind, Mastering the Inner Game of Wealth. Written and read by T.Harv Eker. People are shocked at the beginning of my seminars when one of the first things I tell them is, don't believe a word I say. Why would I suggest that? Because I can only speak from my own experience. None of the concepts and insights I share are inherently true or false, or right or wrong. They simply reflect my own results and the amazing results I've seen in the lives of thousands and thousands of my students. Having said that, however, I believe that if you use the principles you learn in this recording, you will totally transform your life. Don't just listen to this recording. Listen to it as if your life depended on it. Then try the principles out for yourself. Whatever works, keep doing. Whatever doesn't, you're welcome to throw away. I know I may be biased, but when it comes to money, this may be the most important recording you have ever heard. I understand that's a bold statement, but the fact is, this recording provides the missing link between your desire for success and your achievement of success. As you've probably found out by now, those two can be two different worlds. It all comes down to this. If your subconscious financial blueprint is not set for success, nothing you learn, nothing you know, and nothing you do will make much of a difference. In this recording, I will demystify for you why some people are destined to be rich and others are destined for a life of struggle. You will understand the root causes of success, mediocrity, or financial failure and begin changing your financial future for the better. You will understand how childhood influences shape our financial blueprint and how these influences can lead to self-defeating thoughts and habits. You will experience powerful declarations that will help you replace your non-supportive ways of thinking with mental wealth files so that you think and succeed just as rich people do. You will also learn practical, step-by-step strategies for increasing your income and building wealth. In the first part of this recording, I will explain how each of us are taught and conditioned to think and act when it comes to money, and will outline key strategies for interceding and revising our mental money blueprint. In part 2, I will examine in greater depth the differences between how rich, middle class, and poor people think, and share with you what I like to call wealth files, and the resulting actions you should take that will lead to lasting and permanent changes in your life and your wealth. So what's my experience? Where am I coming from? Was I always successful? I wish. Like many of you, I supposedly had a lot of potential, but had little to show for it. I read all the books, listened to all the tapes, and went to all the seminars. I really wanted to be successful. I don't know whether it was for the money, the freedom, the sense of achievement, or just to prove I was good enough in my parents' eyes, but I was almost always obsessed with becoming a success. During my 20s, I started several different businesses, each with the dream of making my fortune, but my results went from dismal to worse. Then, as luck would have it, I got some advice from an extremely rich friend of my father's. He was at my parents' house playing cards with the boys, and in passing, saw me. This was the third time I'd moved back home, and I was living in the lower-level suite, otherwise known as the basement. I suppose my dad had complained to him of my woeful existence, because when he saw me, he had the sympathy in his eyes usually reserved for the bereaved at a funeral. He said, "Harv, I started in the same way as you, a complete disaster." He went on and said, "But then I got some advice that changed my life, and I'd like to pass it on to you." He said, "If you're not doing as well as you'd like, all that means is that there's something you don't know." Well, being a brash young man at the time, I thought I knew pretty well everything, but alas, my bank account said something very different. So I finally began to listen. My father's friend continued, "Did you know that most rich people think in very similar ways?" I said, "No, I never really considered that." To which he replied, "It's not an exact science, but for the most part, rich people think a certain way, and poor people think a completely different way, and those ways of thinking determine their actions and therefore determine their results." He went on, "Harv, if you thought the way rich people do, and did what rich people do you believe you could become rich too?" Well, nothing else was working in my life, so I figured what the heck and threw myself wholeheartedly into studying rich people and how they think. I learned everything I could about the inner workings of the mind, but concentrated primarily on the psychology of money and success. I discovered that it was true. Rich people really do think differently from poor and even middle-class people. Eventually, I became aware of how my own thoughts were holding me back from wealth. More important, I learned several powerful techniques and strategies to actually recondition my mind so that I would think in the same ways that rich people do. Finally, I said, "Enough yakking about it, let's put it to the test." I decided to attempt yet another business. Because I was really into health and exercise, I opened one of the first retail fitness stores in all of North America. I didn't have any money, so I had to borrow $2,000 on my Visa card to get the business started. I began using what I'd learned in modeling rich people, both in terms of their business strategies and their thinking strategies. The first thing I did was commit to my success and playing to win. I swore I would focus and never even consider leaving this business until I was a millionaire or more. I also began challenging my mental approach whenever I began thinking in financially negative or counterproductive ways. In the past, I'd believed that whatever my mind said was truth. I learned, however, that in many, many ways, my mind was my biggest obstacle to success. I chose not to entertain thoughts that did not empower me towards my vision of wealth. I used every one of the principles you are going to learn in this recording. Did it work? Boy, did it work. The business was so successful that I was able to open 10 stores in only 2.5 years. I then sold half the company's shares to a Fortune 500 company for $1.6 million. After that, I moved to sunny San Diego. I took a couple of years off to refine my strategies and began doing some one-on-one business consulting. Well, I guess it was pretty effective for people because they kept bringing friends and partners and associates to our sessions. Soon, I was coaching 1-on-2, 1-on-5, 1-on-10, sometimes 20 people at a time. Then, one of my clients suggested that I might as well open up a school. I thought that was a great idea, so I did. I founded the Street Smart Business School and taught thousands and thousands of people all across North America street smart business strategies for high-speed success. And as I traveled across the country giving my seminars, I noticed something. I noticed something very, 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 very strange. In that you could have two people sitting side by side in exactly the same room, learning exactly the same principles and strategies. And one person would take these tools and they would skyrocket to success. But what do you think might happen to the person sitting maybe right beside them? The answer is, not a heck of a lot. And that's when it became obvious once again that you can have the greatest tools in the world, but if you've got a tiny leak in your toolbox, and I'm pointing to my head right now, you've got a problem. And so that's what you're going to learn in this recording. How to master the inner game of money to win the game of money. How to think rich to get rich. You know, people often ask me whether my success was a one-shot deal or whether it has continued. Let me put it this way. Using the exact principles I teach, I have now earned millions and millions of dollars, and I am a multi-millionaire several times over. My investments and business ventures all seem to skyrocket. Some people tell me I have the Midas touch, and you know what? They're right. But what they might not realize is that having the Midas touch is simply another way of saying having a financial blueprint that is set for success. And that's exactly what you will have once you learn the principles and do the work in this recording. It's interesting to note that this audio is not as much about learning as it is about unlearning. It is essential that you recognize how your old ways of thinking and acting have gotten you exactly where you are right now. If you're really rich and happy, fine. But if you're not, I invite you to consider some possibilities that may not fit into your box of what you currently think is right or even appropriate for you. And even though I suggest that you don't believe a word I say, and I want you to test these concepts out in your own life, I'm going to ask you to trust the ideas you are listening to, not because you know me personally, but because thousands and thousands of people have already changed their lives as a result of the principles in this very recording. I have a saying, it's not enough to be in the right place at the right time. You have to be the right person in the right place at the right time. So who are you? How do you think? What are your beliefs? How confident are you in yourself? How well do you relate to others? How much do you trust others? Do you truly feel that you deserve wealth? What is your ability to act in spite of fear, in spite of worry, in spite of inconvenience, and in spite of discomfort? The fact is that your character, your thinking, and your beliefs are a critical part of what determines the level of your success. One of my favorite wealth principles is this: your income can only grow to the extent that you do. Have you noticed how some people have a lot of money and then lose it, or see excellent opportunities start well, but then go sour on them? Now you know the real cause. On the outside, it looks like bad luck, a downturn in the economy, a lousy partner, whatever. On the inside, however, it's another matter. That's why, if you come into big money when you're not ready for it on the inside, your wealth will be short-lived and the chances are you will lose it. The vast majority of people simply do not have the internal capacity to create and hold on to large amounts of money and success and the increased challenges that go with money and success. That, my friends, is the primary reason they don't have much money. A perfect example is lottery winners. Research has shown again and again that regardless of the size of their winnings, most lottery winners eventually return to their original financial state, the amount they can comfortably handle. On the other hand, the opposite occurs for self-made millionaires. Notice that when self-made millionaires lose their money, they usually have it back within a relatively short time. Donald Trump's a great example. Trump was worth billions, lost everything, and then a couple of years later, he got it all back again and more. Why does this phenomenon happen? It happens because while some self-made millionaires may lose their money, they never lose the most important ingredient to their success: their millionaire mind. Most people do not reach their full potential. Most people are not successful. Research shows that 80% of individuals will never be financially free in the way they'd like to be, and that 80% will never claim to be truly happy. The reason is simple. Most people are unconscious. They are a little asleep at the wheel. They work and think on a superficial level of life, based only on what they can see. They live strictly in the visible world. Imagine a tree. Let's suppose this tree represents the tree of life. On this tree, there are fruits. In life, our fruits are called results. So we look at the fruits, our results, and we don't like them. We don't have enough of them. They're too small. They don't taste good. What do we tend to do? Most of us put even more attention and focus on the fruits, our results. But what is it that actually creates those particular fruits? It's the seeds and the roots that create those fruits. It's what's under the ground that creates what's above the ground. It's what's invisible that creates what's visible. So what does that mean? It means that if you want to change the fruits, you will first have to change the roots. If you want to change the visible, you must first change the invisible. Of course, some say that seeing is believing. The question I have for such people is, why do you bother paying your electric bill? Although you cannot see electricity, you can certainly recognize and use its power. If you have any doubt as to whether it exists, just stick your finger in an electric socket, and I guarantee your doubts will quickly disappear. In my experience, what you cannot see in this world is far more powerful than anything you can see. You may or may not agree with this statement, but to the extent that you do not apply this principle in your life, you must be suffering. Why? Because you're going against the laws of nature, whereby what is under the ground creates what is above the ground, where what is invisible creates what is visible. As humans, we are a part of nature, not above it. Consequently, when we align with the laws of nature and work on our roots, our inner world, our life flows smoothly. When we don't, life gets rough. In every forest, on every farm, in every orchard on earth, it's what's under the ground that creates what's above the ground. That's why placing your attention on the fruits that you've already grown is futile. You cannot change fruits that are already hanging on the tree. You can, however, change tomorrow's fruits. But to do so, you'll have to dig below the ground and strengthen the roots. Here is a wealth principle I firmly believe in. Money is a result. Wealth is a result. Health is a result. Illness is a result. Your weight is a result. We live in a world of cause and effect, of cause and result. Have you ever heard someone assert that a lack of money was a bit of a problem? Now hear this. A lack of money is never, ever, ever a problem. A lack of money is merely a symptom of what's going on underneath. Whatever results you're getting, be they rich or poor, good or bad, positive or negative, always remember that your outer world is simply a reflection of your inner world. If things aren't going well in your outer life, it's because they aren't going well in your inner life. It's that simple. Let's talk for a second about declarations, which I consider a powerful secret for change. In my seminars, we use accelerated learning techniques that allow you to learn faster and remember more of what you learn. The key is involvement. Our approach follows from the old saying, what you hear, you forget. What you see, you remember. What you do, you understand. So I'm going to ask that every time you reach the end of a major principle in this recording, you first put your hand on your heart and make a verbal declaration, and then touch your head with your index finger and make another verbal declaration. What's a declaration? It's simply a positive statement that you make emphatically out loud. Why are declarations such a valuable tool? Because everything is made up of one thing, energy. All energy travels in frequencies and vibrations. Therefore, each declaration you make carries its own vibrational frequency. When you state a declaration aloud, its energy vibrates throughout the cells of your body, and by touching your body at the same time, you can feel its unique resonance. Declarations not only send a specific message to the universe, they also send a powerful message to your subconscious mind. I recommend that you state your declarations aloud each morning and each evening. Doing your declarations while looking into a mirror will accelerate the process even more. Now, I have to admit that when I first heard of all this, I said, no way, this declaration stuff is far too hokey for me. But because I was broke at the time, I decided, what the heck, it can't hurt, and I started doing it. Now I'm rich, so it shouldn't come as a big surprise that I believe that declarations really work. Either way, I'd rather be really hokey and really rich than really cool and really broke. How about you? That said, I invite you to place your hand on your heart and repeat the following. My inner world creates my outer world. Now touch your head and say, I have a millionaire mind. As a special bonus, if you go to www.millionairemindbook.com and click on free book bonuses, we will give you a free list of all the declarations in this recording presented in calligraphy in a printable format suitable for framing. Whether I'm appearing on radio or television, I'm well known for making the following statement. Give me 5 minutes and I can predict your financial future for the rest of your life. How? In a short conversation, I can identify what's called your money and success blueprint. Each of us has a personal money and success blueprint already embedded in our subconscious mind. And it is this blueprint, more than anything and everything else combined, that will determine your financial destiny. I want to introduce you to an extremely important formula because it determines how you create your reality and your wealth. Many of the most respected teachers in the field of human potential have used this formula as a foundation for their teachings. It's called the process of manifestation, and it goes like this. Thoughts lead to feelings, feelings lead to actions, and actions lead to results. Your financial blueprint consists of a combination of your thoughts, feelings, and actions in the arena of money. So how is your money blueprint formed? The answer is simple. Your financial blueprint consists primarily of the information or programming you received in the past, especially as a young child. Who are the primary sources of this programming or conditioning? For most people, this might include parents, siblings, friends, authority figures, teachers, religious leaders, media, and your culture, to name a few. Do you think a child comes out of the womb with his or her attitudes towards money, or do you believe the child is taught how to deal with money? The same holds true for you, me, for everyone. You were taught how to think and act when it comes to money. These teachings become your conditioning, and these automatic responses run you for the rest of your life. Unless, of course, you intercede and revise your mind's money files, which is exactly what we're going to do in this recording. We said earlier that thoughts lead to feelings, that feelings lead to actions, and that actions lead to results. So here's an interesting question. Where do your thoughts come from? Your thoughts originate from the files of information you have in the storage cabinets of your mind. So where does this information come from? It comes from your past programming. That's right. Your past conditioning determines every thought that bubbles up in your mind. To reflect this understanding, we can now revise our process of manifestation in the following manner. Your programming leads to your thoughts lead to your feelings lead to your actions, and your actions lead to your results. Therefore, just as is done with a personal computer, by changing your programming, you take the first essential step to changing your results. We are conditioned in three primary ways in every arena of life, including money. Verbal programming. What did you hear when you were young? Modeling. What did you see when you were young? Specific incidents. What did you experience when you were young? Let's begin with the first influence, verbal programming. What did you hear about money, wealth, and rich people when you were growing up? Did you ever hear phrases like, money's the root of all evil, save your money for a rainy day, rich people are greedy, filthy rich? Money doesn't grow on trees, you know. Money doesn't buy happiness. Money talks. The rich get richer and the poor get poorer. You get the picture. In my household, every time I asked my father for any money, I'd hear him scream, "What am I, made of money?" Jokingly, I'd respond, "I wish. I'll take an arm, a hand, even a finger." You know, he never laughed once. All the statements you heard about money when you were young remain in your subconscious mind as part of the blueprint that is running your financial life. An example of the power of verbal conditioning came at the expense of one of our Millionaire Mind seminar participants. Stephen didn't have a problem earning money. His challenge was keeping it. At the time Stephen came to the course, he was earning over $800,000 a year and had been doing so for the past 9 years. Yet, he was still barely scraping by. Somehow, he managed to spend his money, lend it, or lose it all by making poor investment decisions. Whatever the reason, his net worth was exactly zero. Stephen shared with us that when he was growing up, his mom always used to say, "Rich people are greedy. They make their money off the sweat of the poor. You should have just enough to get by. After that, you're a pig." It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what was going on inside Stephen's subconscious mind. No wonder he was broke. He was verbally conditioned by his mother to believe that rich people are greedy. Therefore, his mind linked up rich with greedy, which of course is bad. Since he didn't want to be bad, subconsciously he couldn't be rich. Stephen loved his mom and didn't want her to disapprove of him. Obviously, based on her beliefs, if he were to get rich, she wouldn't approve. Therefore, the only thing for him to do was to get rid of any extra money beyond just getting by, otherwise he'd be a pig. Now, you would think that in choosing between being rich and being approved of by mom or anyone else for that matter, most people would take being rich. Not a chance. Sure, riches would seem to be the logical choice, but when the subconscious mind must choose between deeply rooted emotions and logic, emotions will almost always win. Which leads us to an all-important wealth principle. When the subconscious mind must choose between deeply rooted emotions and logic, emotions will almost always win. In my own life, after a slow start, I began doing well in business, but never seemed to make money with my stocks. In becoming aware of my money blueprint, I went back to when I was young and recalled that each day after work, my dad would sit down at the dinner table with the newspaper, check the stock pages, slam his fist on the table and shout, "Those stinking stocks!" He then spent the next half hour ranting about how stupid the whole system is and how you have a better chance of making money playing the slot machines in Las Vegas. Now that you understand the power of verbal conditioning, can you see that it's no wonder I couldn't make any money in the stock market? I was literally programmed to fail, programmed to unconsciously pick the wrong stock at the wrong price at the wrong time. Why? To subconsciously validate my money blueprint that said, stocks stink. All I can say is by digging out this massive toxic weed from my inner financial garden, I began getting inundated with more fruits. Virtually the day after I reconditioned myself, the stocks I chose began to boom, and I've continued to have amazing success in the stock market ever since. There are 4 key elements of change, each of which is essential in reprogramming your financial blueprint. They are simple but profoundly powerful. The first key is awareness. Write down all the statements you heard about money, wealth, and rich people when you were young. The second is understanding. Write down how you believe these statements have affected your financial life so far. The third is disassociation. Can you see that these thoughts represent only what you learned and are not part of your anatomy and not who you are? Can you see that you have a choice in the present moment to be different? And the fourth key is reconditioning, and we'll begin to do that with a declaration. Place your hand over your heart and say, "What I heard about money isn't necessarily true. I choose to adopt new ways of thinking that support my happiness and success." Touch your head now and say, "I have a millionaire mind." The second way we are conditioned subconsciously is called modeling. What were your parents or guardians like in the arena of money when you were growing up? Did one or both of them manage their money well, or did they mismanage money? Were they spenders, or were they savers? Were they shrewd investors, or were they non-investors? Were they risk takers, or really conservative? Was money consistently there, or was the flow more sporadic? Did money come easily in your family, or was it always a struggle? Why is this information important? You've probably heard the saying, monkey see, monkey do. Well, humans aren't far behind. As kids, we learn just about everything from modeling. Although most of us would hate to admit it, there's more than a grain of truth to the old saying, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. For example, my dad was in the home building business. He built anywhere from a dozen to 100 homes per project. Each project took a huge amount of capital investment. My dad would have to put up everything we had and borrow heavily from the bank until the homes were sold and the cash came through. Consequently, at the beginning of each project, we had no money and were in debt up to our eyeballs. As you can imagine, during this period, my dad was not in the best of moods, nor was generosity his strong suit. If I asked him for anything that cost even a penny, his standard reply after the usual, "What am I made of money?" was, "Are you crazy?" Of course, I wouldn't get a dime. This scenario would last for about a year or two until the homes were finally sold. Then we'd be rolling in dough. All of a sudden, my dad was a different person. He'd be happy, kind, and extremely generous. He'd even come over and ask me if I needed a few bucks. I felt like giving him his glare back, but I wasn't that stupid, so I said, "Sure, Dad, thanks," and rolled my eyes. Life was good until that dreaded day when he'd come home and announce, "I found a good piece of land. We're going to build again." I distinctly remember saying, "Great, Dad, good luck," as my heart sank knowing the struggle that was about to unfold again. This pattern lasted from the time I could remember, when I was about 6, until the age of 21, when I moved out of my parents' house for good. Then it stopped, or so I thought. At 21 years of age, I finished school and became, you guessed it, a builder. I then went on to several other types of project-based businesses. For some strange reason, I'd make a small fortune, but just a short time later, I'd be broke. I'd get into another business and believe I was on top of the world again, only to hit bottom a year later. This up and down pattern went on for nearly 10 years before I realized that maybe the problem wasn't the type of business I was choosing, the partners I was choosing, the employees I had, the state of the economy, or my decision to take time off and relax when things were going well. I finally recognized that maybe, just maybe, I was unconsciously reliving my dad's up and down income pattern. All I can say is, thank goodness I learned what you're learning in this recording and was able to recondition myself out of that yo-yo model and into having a consistently growing income. In part 1 of this recording, we discussed the process of manifestation. Thoughts lead to feelings, feelings lead to actions, and actions lead to results. Everything begins with your thoughts, which are produced by your mind. Isn't it amazing that our mind is pretty much the basis for our life, and yet most of us have no clue as to how this powerful apparatus functions? So let's start by taking a simple look at how your mind works. Metaphorically, your mind is nothing more than a big file cabinet, similar to what you'd find in your office or home. All information that comes in is labeled and filed in folders so that it's easy to retrieve to help you survive. Did you hear that? I didn't say thrive, I said survive. In every situation in front of you, you go to the files of your mind to determine how to respond. Say, for example, you're considering a financial opportunity. You automatically go to your file labeled money, and from there decide what to do. The only thoughts you can have about money will be what are stored in your money file. That's all you can think about because that's all that's in your mind in that category. So you decide based on what you believe is logical, sensible, and appropriate for you at the time. You make what you think is the right choice. The problem, however, is that your right choice may not be a successful choice. In fact, what makes perfect sense to you may consistently produce perfectly poor results. For instance, let's imagine my wife is in the mall. That shouldn't be too hard for me to imagine. She sees this green purse. It's on sale for 25% off. She immediately goes to her mind files with the question, should I get this purse? In a nanosecond, her mind files come back with the answer. You've been looking for a green purse to go with those green shoes you bought last week. Plus, it's just the right size. Buy it. As she rushes to the checkout counter, her mind is not only thrilled that she's going to have this beautiful purse, but glowing with pride that she got it for 25% off. To her mind, this purchase makes perfect sense. She wants it, she believes she needs it, and it's such a deal. However, at no point did her mind come up with the thought, true, this is really a nice purse, and true, this is a great deal, but right now I'm $3,000 in debt, so I better hold off. She didn't come up with that information because no file in her head contains that information. The file of when you're in debt, don't buy anymore was never installed in her and doesn't exist, which means that particular choice is not an option. Do you catch my drift? If you've got files in your cabinet that are non-supportive to financial success, those will be the only choices you can make. They'll be natural, automatic, and make perfect sense to you, but in the end, they will still produce financial failure or mediocrity at best. Conversely, if you've got mind files that support financial success, you will naturally and automatically make decisions that produce success. You won't have to think about it. When it comes to money, wouldn't it be incredible if you could inherently think how rich people think? I sure hope you said absolutely or something to that effect. As we stated previously, the first step to any change is awareness, meaning the first step to thinking the way rich people think is to know how rich people think. Rich people think very differently from poor and middle-class people. They think differently about money, wealth, themselves, other people, and pretty well every other facet of life. Now we're going to examine some of these differences, and as part of your reconditioning, install alternative wealth files into your mind. With new wealth files come new choices. You can then catch yourself when you are thinking like poor and middle-class people and consciously shift your focus to how rich people think. Remember, you can choose to think in ways that will support you in your happiness and success instead of ways that don't. Having said this, however, I want to add that in no way, shape, or form do I mean to degrade poor people or want to appear to be without compassion for their situation. I do not believe that rich people are better than poor people. They're just richer. At the same time, I want to make sure you get the message, so I'm going to make the distinctions between the rich and poor as extreme as possible. There are 17 ways rich people think and act differently than poor and middle-class people. They're summed up in wealth files. Here's the first one. Rich people believe, I create my life. Poor people believe, life happens to me. If you want to create wealth, it is imperative that you believe that you are at the steering wheel of your life, especially your financial life. If you don't believe this, then you must inherently believe that you have little or no control over your life, and therefore you have little or no control over your financial success. That is not a rich attitude. Did you ever notice that it's usually poor people who spend a fortune playing the lottery? They actually believe their wealth is going to come from someone picking their name out of a hat. They spend Saturday night glued to the TV, excitedly watching the draw to see if wealth is going to land on them this week. Sure, everyone wants to win the lottery, and even rich people play for fun once in a while, but first, they don't spend half their paycheck on tickets, and second, winning the lottery is not their primary strategy for creating wealth. You have to believe that you are the one who creates your success, that you are the one who creates your mediocrity, and that you are the one creating your struggle around money and success. Consciously or unconsciously, it's still you. Instead of taking responsibility for what's going on in their lives, poor people choose to play the role of the victim. A victim's predominant thought is often, poor me. So presto, by virtue of the law of intention, that's literally what victims get. They get to be poor. Notice that I said they play the role of the victim. I didn't say they are victims. I don't believe anyone is a victim. I believe people play the victim because they think it gets them something. We'll discuss this in more detail shortly. That said, how can you tell when people are playing the victim? Well, they leave 3 very obvious clues. First clue is blame. When it comes to why they're not rich, most victims are professionals at the blame game. The object of this game is to see how many people and circumstances you can point the finger at without ever looking at yourself. It's fun, for victims at least. Unfortunately, it's not such a blast for anyone who is unlucky enough to be around them. That's because those in close proximity to victims become easy targets. Victims blame the economy, they blame the government, they blame the stock market, they blame their employer, they blame their employees, they blame their manager, they blame their partner, they blame their spouse, they blame God, and of course they always blame their parents. It's always someone else, it's always something else that is to blame. The problem is anything or anyone but them. Victim clue number 2. Justifying. If victims aren't blaming, you'll also find them justifying or rationalizing their situation by saying something like, money's not really important. Now let me ask you this question. If you said that your husband or your wife or your boyfriend or your girlfriend or your partner or your friend weren't all that important, would any of them be around for very long? I don't think so, and neither would money. At my live seminars, some participants always come up to me and say, you know, Harv, money's not really that important. I look them directly in the eyes and say, you're broke, right? They usually look down at their feet and meekly reply with something like, well, right now I'm having a few financial challenges, but I retort, no, it's not right now. It's always. You've always been broke or close to it. Yes or yes. At this point, they usually nod their head in agreement and woefully return to their seats, ready to listen and learn as they finally realize what a disastrous effect this one belief has had on their lives. Of course they're broke. Would you have a motorcycle if it wasn't important to you? Of course not. Would you have a pet parrot if it wasn't important to you? Of course not. In the same way, if you don't think that money is important, you simply won't have any. Listen up, my friends. Money is extremely important in the areas in which it works and extremely unimportant in the areas in which it doesn't. And although love may make the world go round, it sure doesn't pay for the building of any hospitals, churches, or homes. It also doesn't feed anybody. If I fail to persuade you and you still somehow believe that money's not important, then I only have 2 words for you. You're broke, and you always will be until you eradicate that non-supportive file from your financial blueprint. Victim clue number 3, complaining. Complaining is the absolute worst possible thing you could do for your health or your wealth. The worst. Why? I'm a big believer in the universal law that states, what you focus on expands. When you are complaining, what are you focusing on? What's right with your life or what's wrong with it? Well, you're obviously focusing on what's wrong with it. And since what you focus on expands, you'll keep getting more of what's wrong. Many teachers in the personal development field talk about the law of attraction. It states that like attracts like, meaning that when you are complaining, you're actually attracting crap into your life. Have you ever noticed that complainers usually have a tough life? It seems that everything that could go wrong does go wrong for them. They say, "Of course I complain. Look how crappy my life is." And now that you know better, you can explain to them, "No, it's because you complain that your life is so crappy. Shut up and don't stand near me." I stay as far away from complainers as possible because negative energy is infectious. Plenty of people, however, love to hang out and listen to complainers. Why? It's simple. They're waiting for their turn. You think that's bad? Wait till you hear what happened to me. Here's some homework that I promise will change your life. For the next 7 days, I challenge you to not complain at all. Not just out loud, but in your head as well. I've given this challenge to thousands of people, and I'm blown away at how many of them have told me that this one teensy-weensy exercise has totally transformed their lives. I guarantee you'll be astonished at how amazing your life will be when you stop focusing on and thereby stop attracting crap into your life. Now you're ready to hear one of the greatest success secrets in the world. Are you ready? Listen to this carefully. There is no such thing as a really rich victim. Did you get that? I'll say it again. There's no such thing as a really rich victim. Besides, who would listen? Oh, I got a scratch on my yacht. To which almost anyone would respond, who gives a hoot? It's time to decide. You can be a victim or you can be rich, but you can't be both. Every time, and I mean every time you blame, justify, or complain, you are slitting your financial throat. Sure, it would be nice to use a kinder and gentler metaphor, but forget it. I'm not interested in kind and gentle right now. I'm interested in helping you see exactly what the hell you might be doing to yourself. It's time to take back your power and acknowledge that you create everything that is in your life and everything that is not in it. Realize that you create your wealth, you create your non-wealth, and you create every level in between. Now, place your hand on your heart and declare, I create the exact level of my financial success. Now, touch your head and say, I have a millionaire mind. I'd like you to take these millionaire mind actions. 1. Every time you catch yourself blaming, justifying, or complaining, slide your index finger across your neck as a trigger to remind yourself that you are slitting your financial throat. 2. Do a debrief. At the end of each day, write down one thing that went well and one thing that didn't. Then write the answer to the following question. How did I create each of these situations? This exercise will keep you accountable for your life and make you aware of the strategies that are working for you and the strategies that are not. Wealth file number 2. Rich people play the money game to win. Poor people play the money game not to lose. Poor people play the money game on defense rather than offense. Let me ask you, if you were to play any sport or any game strictly on defense, what are the chances of your winning that game? Most people would agree, slim and none. Yet that's exactly how most people play the money game. Their primary concern is survival and security instead of creating wealth and abundance. So what is your goal? What is your objective? What is your true intention? The goal of truly rich people is to have massive wealth and abundance. Not just some money, but lots of money. So what is the big goal of poor people? To have enough to pay the bills, and on time would be a miracle. Again, let me remind you of the power of intention. When your intention is to have enough to pay the bills, that's exactly how much you're going to get. Just enough to pay the bills and not a dime more. Middle-class people at least go a step further. Too bad it's a tiny step. Their big goal in life also happens to be their favorite word in the whole wide world. They just want to be comfortable. I hate to break the news to you, but there's a huge difference between being comfortable and being rich. I have to admit, I've had the experience of being on all three sides of the proverbial fence. I've been extremely broke, as in having to borrow $1 for gas for my car. But let me qualify that. First, it wasn't even my car. Second, that dollar came in the form of 4 quarters. Do you know how embarrassing it is for an adult to pay for gas with 4 quarters? The kid at the pump looked at me as if I were some kind of vending machine robber and then just shook his head and laughed. Once I got my act together, I graduated to the level of being comfortable. Comfortable is nice. At least you get to go out to decent restaurants for a change. But pretty well all I could order was chicken. Now, there's nothing wrong with chicken if that's what you really want, but often it's not. In fact, people who are only financially comfortable usually decide on what to eat by looking at the right-hand side of the menu, the price side. What would you like for dinner tonight, dear? I'll have this $7.95 dish. Let's see what it is. Surprise, surprise, it's the chicken for the 19th time this week. I have to say that for me personally, one of the best things about being rich is not having to look at the prices on the menu anymore. I eat exactly what I want to eat, regardless of the price. I can assure you, I didn't do that when I was broke or comfortable. It boils down to this. If your goal is to be comfortable, chances are you will never get rich. But if your goal is to be rich, chances are you'll end up mighty comfortable. One of the principles I teach in my Millionaire Mind seminars is, if you shoot for the stars, you'll at least hit the moon. Now place your hand on your heart and declare, my goal is to become a millionaire and more. Now touch your head and say, I have a millionaire mind. Here are your Millionaire Mind actions. 1. Write down 2 financial objectives that demonstrate your intention to create abundance, not mediocrity or poverty. Write play-to-win goals for your first, annual income, and second, your net worth. Make these goals achievable with a realistic time frame, yet at the same time, remember to shoot for the stars. 2. Go to an upscale restaurant and order a meal without asking how much it costs. If funds are tight, sharing is acceptable. P.S. No chicken. Wealth file number 3. Rich people are committed to being rich. Poor people want to be rich. Ask most people if they want to be rich, and they'd look at you as if you were crazy. Of course I want to be rich, they'd say. The truth, however, is that most people don't really want to be rich. Why? Because they have a lot of negative wealth files in their subconscious mind that tells them there's something wrong with being rich. At our Millionaire Mind Intensive, one of the questions we ask people is, what are some of the possible negatives about being rich or trying to get rich? Here's what some people have to say. See if you can relate to any of these. What if I make it and lose it? Then I'll really be a failure. I'll be at the highest tax bracket and I'll have to give half my money to the government. It's too much work. I could lose my health trying to get rich. Everyone's going to want a handout. I could be robbed. It's too much responsibility. I'll have to manage all that money. And on and on and on it goes. As I mentioned earlier, each of us has wealth files inside the cabinet called our mind. These files contain our personal beliefs that include why being rich would be wonderful. However, for most people, these files also include information as to why being rich might not be so wonderful. This means they have mixed internal messages about wealth. One part of them gleefully says, having more money will make life a lot more fun. But then another part screams, yeah, but I'm going to have to work like a dog. What's the fun in that? One part says, I'll be able to travel the world. Then the other part chirps in, yeah, and everyone in the world is going to want a handout. These mixed messages may seem innocent enough, but in reality, they are one of the major reasons most people never become rich. You can look at it like this. The universe, which is another way of saying higher power, is akin to a big mail-order department. It is constantly delivering people, events, and things to you. You order what you get by sending energetic messages out to the universe based on your predominant beliefs. Again, based on the law of attraction, the universe will do its best to say yes and support you. But if you have mixed messages in your files, the universe can't understand what you want. The number one reason most people don't get what they want is because they don't know what they want. Rich people are totally clear that they want wealth. They are unwavering in their desire. They are fully committed to creating wealth. As long as it's legal, moral, and ethical, they will do whatever it takes to have wealth. Rich people do not send mixed messages to the universe. Poor people do. By the way, when you read the last paragraph, if a little voice inside your head said something to the effect of, rich people don't care if it's legal, moral, or ethical, you are definitely doing the right thing in listening to this recording. You'll soon find out what a detrimental way of thinking that really is. Earlier, we talked about the power of intention. I know it might be hard to believe, but you always get what you want, what you subconsciously want, not what you say you want. Put bluntly, if you are not achieving the wealth you say you desire, there's a good chance it's because first, you subconsciously don't really want wealth, or second, you're not willing to do what it takes to create it. Let's explore further. There are actually 3 levels of so-called wanting. The first level is, I want to be rich. That's another way of saying, I'll take it if it falls in my lap. Wanting alone is useless. Have you ever noticed that wanting doesn't necessarily lead to having? Wealth does not come from merely wanting it. The second level of wanting is, I choose to be rich. This entails deciding to become rich. Choosing is a much stronger energy and goes hand in hand with being responsible for creating your reality. Good, but not good enough. The third level of wanting is, I commit to being rich. The definition of the word commit is to devote oneself unreservedly. This means holding absolutely nothing back, giving 100% of everything you've got to achieving the goal of creating wealth. It means being willing to do whatever it takes for as long as it takes. This is the warrior's way. No excuses, no ifs, no buts, no maybes, and failure is not an option. The warrior's way is simple. I will be rich or I will die trying. I commit to being rich. Try saying that to yourself. What comes up for you? For some, it feels empowering. For others, it feels daunting. Most people would never truly commit to being rich. If you ask them, would you bet your life that in the next 10 years you will be wealthy? Most would say, no way. That's the difference between rich people and poor people. It's precisely because people won't truly commit to being rich that they are not rich and most likely never will be. Some might say, Harv, what are you talking about? I work my butt off. I'm trying real hard. Of course I'm committed to being rich. And I would reply that your trying means very little. Again, the definition of commitment is to devote oneself unreservedly. The key word is unreservedly, which means you're putting everything, and I mean everything you've got into it. I hate to have to be the one to tell you this, but getting rich is not a stroll in the park, and anyone who tells you it is either knows a heck of a lot more than me or is a little out of integrity. In my experience, getting rich takes focus, courage, knowledge, expertise, 100% of your effort, a never give up attitude, and of course, a rich mindset. Again, what this means is that if you are not fully, totally, and truly committed to creating wealth, chances are you won't. Are you willing to work 16 hours a day? Rich people are. Are you willing to work 7 days a week and give up most of your weekends? Rich people are. Are you willing to sacrifice seeing your family, your friends, and give up your recreations and hobbies? Rich people are. Are you willing to risk all of your time, energy, and startup capital with no guarantee of returns? Rich people are. It's interesting to note that once you do commit, the universe will bend over backwards to assist you, guide you, support you, and even create miracles for you. But first, you have to commit. Now, place your hand on your heart and declare, I commit to being rich. And now, touch your head and say, I have a millionaire mind. Here are your millionaire mind actions. 1. Write a short paragraph on exactly why creating wealth is important to you. Be very specific. 2. Meet with a friend or family member who is willing to support you. Tell that person you want to evoke the power of commitment for the purpose of creating greater success. Put your hand on your heart, look that person in the eye, and repeat the following statement. I, and then state your name, do hereby commit to becoming a millionaire or more by such and such a date. When you're done, tell your partner to say, I believe in you. Then you say, thank you.